Hey, hey, hey. Time for another Out of This World story from rSpace. Our protagonist thought he married a good church-going woman. Today on rSpace, she found a new form of worship, and it involved a lot less praying and a lot more laying. Caught wife's affair on her home cameras, so I sent the footage to everyone she knows. It's crazy how one person being selfish enough to ruin the lives of everyone around them, people that they claim to love. I've just discovered that my wife has been cheating on me, and writing all about this is one way that I'm lashing out and managing my emotions. Sure, I could write this all out in a journal somewhere, but it genuinely feels like I'm protecting her if I do that. Nope, instead I want to expose her. None of the names in this will be changed, so in case you can somehow figure out the people involved, then great. Do with that information whatever you can. Anyway, to start this whole thing off, I'm 38 male and my wife, Grace, is 35 female. We met during the years that I still attended church. I was new to the area back then and I sat beside her. She knew I was a new face and she was very friendly to me during and after the service. She asked for my number and that was it. It's been over 10 years now since we met. I mean, it isn't exactly faulty thinking to assume that someone you meet in church will be a good person. Though I think most of us know that's not how things play out in the real world, since religious people can be just as bad as atheists. I mean, she showed me ultimately that religion doesn't mean anything if a crap person wants to be a crap person. Though I won't say I didn't know that before. I guess I just thought she was different. Grace used to work in the culinary industry, but at a point, the lifestyle started to take a toll on her with the long hours and somewhat toxic environments. When we had the first of our 2 kids, it seemed like a good point for her to bow out of the industry and be a stay-at-home mom for the most part. She has always been into baking and pastries, so she started taking orders out of the house on a smaller scale. It wasn't negligible income for us, so I supported her as much as I could. Every day, I'd go out to work and come back and meet a clean house, happy children, and a hot meal. I operate heavy machinery, so it is genuinely appreciated after a very long and hard day. If only I knew that those moments that I spent out of the house were being used for a lot more than I thought. The problem started when I noticed that a watch of mine was missing. It was meant to be in our bedroom, but it was simply not there. The case was, but the watch wasn't. The first thing that came to mind was that I had taken it off in some other part of the house, or potentially even outside the house, and misplaced it from there. It was also possible that my children had carried it off somewhere inconvenient. So I searched and searched, but I had no luck finding it. I asked my kids, I checked the car, I checked work, but I couldn't find it. Of course, I asked her. And she seemed a little shaken by the notion that I could have lost it, considering how expensive it was, but she also had no idea where it was. I think it was at that point that I decided to install cameras outside the house, though it took me over a month after the watch went missing to finally pull the trigger on that, with a few inside as well. I kept thinking that we could have been burgled, and it wasn't a thought I was comfortable pushing aside with my kids in the house. I consider myself to be a tech-oriented person, so it wasn't hard for me to do a research and find a good camera I could use. That ended up being one of the best decisions of my life. So I bought them in person and installed them over the weekend, which wasn't hard for me considering my work. I did need a little online help when it came to setting up the software. Grace was at home when I was installing the ones outdoors, but she went out with the kids before I started on the ones inside. I think that ended up being a happy coincidence for me because it seemed that she wasn't totally aware of the indoor ones. She had been talking about potentially getting a babysitter more often, so I felt that indoors was necessary. They weren't hidden cameras by any means, but if she had been indoors when I was hammering and drilling, she might have been more aware of them. The funniest thing is that I'm pretty sure I told her that I was installing them indoors, but maybe it slipped her mind and she hadn't gotten used to them. What ended up happening was that I went out to work one day, as I usually do, and I got back home without any suspicions. However, while she was upstairs getting ready for bed, I was in the kitchen putting together a snack for the night. I just decided to casually look through the footage of the day. It seemed safe for the most part, but as I quickly scrolled through the saved video, I was able to see 2 adults walk through the living room. I won't even say that I was alarmed because I felt like it could have been a friend or a repair person. It wasn't a person that I recognized, and I had to scroll forward by well over an hour before I saw her and the person walk in the opposite direction towards the door. You know what I still find funny is the fact that she and this person stopped at the edge of the camera frame, 2 feet back, and I wouldn't have seen any of this. He grabbed her by the butt and pulled her in closer to him. After that, they looked at each other's eyes and she giggled. Then they left. That was like 20 seconds, but I can't even describe how much of it destroyed me having to look at it. Honestly, the worst part was that I had no idea whatsoever that my wife was having an affair. So it was honestly like a cold shock. I tried to find every possible explanation. I was in serious denial, but nothing made sense beyond what the obvious answer was. I really couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do at that point. I still don't know, to be honest. Am I supposed to confront her straight up? Am I supposed to find some way to learn more? I never thought I would be in this situation, so I'm honestly so baffled and clueless. I've saved that video to my device, so I have the evidence, but I don't know how to proceed. And just to be clear, I ended up heading upstairs with the best poker face that I could still put on. I couldn't imagine touching her. Do you know what it's like when you can basically envision someone else on top of your wife? It was so disgusting to me. I really need help. I want to know what I should do next, but I'm genuinely out of any ideas on how to handle this. It's not something that most of us will have to face. I'd say your best next step is to take a deep breath, make sure your affairs are in order, and lawyer up. No matter how this plays out, you know she's going to make you out to be a bad guy. Oh, he was always working. I felt so neglected. Blah, blah, blah. We've heard it all before. Update 1. I posted a story about spotting my wife's affair on the cameras that I installed in our home, and I finally have an update. Things are definitely going in the direction of divorce, and I can't see any other way out of it, save for me being a big fool and forgiving her. That's not going to happen, because I can't see myself getting over a cheating wife. There's no way that I'll be able to keep the concept of her cheating out of my head. Now, I eventually brought her attention to the cameras in the house, but I only did so a few days later. To get my head off things, and to give myself a chance for more evidence, I took the kids out to an amusement park and I made it clear that I was going to be out for the entire day. I knew that there was no way she'd be bringing her affair partner home if he was available, and that turned out to be pretty accurate. I made sure not to look at the video footage while I was out, despite how much it was gnawing at me. Seeing my kids happy was the highlight of my day, but the entire thing was soured by the thought of what she had done to us and what she was doing at that very time. Eventually, I got the kids back home and they went to sleep pretty quickly. It was at that point that I managed to watch the video footage, and lo and behold, her affair partner came around. This time, I had them making out on the couch before they went to the room about 10 minutes later. Obviously, there were no cameras in the bedroom, but it was very easy to assume what happened. Again, I saved the videos and I just decided to back them up to my Google Drive in case something happened to my phone before the divorce happened. As soon as I did that, I marched upstairs and confronted her. I remember the first thing that I said was, "Why are you cheating on me?" Looking back, I feel kind of stupid, but I didn't rehearse what I was going to say in a mirror, and I think that was what I truly wanted to know before anything else. She just looked at me, baffled, and if I didn't have the evidence, I would have believed her based on the look alone. She asked me what I was talking about, and I told her that I knew she was having an affair. She denied it. I told her that we could stop pretending since she herself knew that I knew something, but again, she just denied it. At that point, I started to get pissed off, but I fought to keep my cool. I told her that I had evidence and she really wanted to know what it was. It was at that point that I told her that I had video evidence, and I let her in on the fact that there were cameras in the house, not just outside. The shock when I said that was so evident, and I think that was the first point when she realized that I actually had evidence against her. Perhaps she thought that she would have been able to just keep denying for as long as I didn't have proof, even if she knew that I knew. It seemed so silly to me. She asked to see the evidence that I had, and for some reason, I was very curious to see what she would have had to say for herself if I actually showed her the evidence. So I played the videos for her, and I was looking at her the entire time. It's like I could almost hear how hard her heart was beating. Her face didn't change, and she didn't say a single thing as she watched the entire video. This is where things got interesting. I don't know if she was actually thinking or if her brain got fried from getting caught in such a compromising position, but she snatched my phone out of my hands and spiked it to the ground. I'm not even exaggerating. Looking back, it's rather amusing because that obviously didn't change the fact that I had just confronted her with the evidence, but perhaps in that moment, she felt like destroying the evidence would make the problem go away. I don't get it. Needless to say, my phone's screen was shattered badly. She tried to step on it, but I was able to grab it before she did. Honestly, in that moment, I wanted to scream at her because breaking my phone seemed to be the straw that broke the camel's back. But I knew the children were sleeping, and it was too late at night to do that. Instead, I just grabbed my phone and walked out. I really needed to simmer down. Initially, I sat down in the living room, but it felt like my thoughts were about to make me go insane, so I forced myself to step out for a nighttime walk. When I got back, she said that she wanted to talk, and I asked what about. She said that she didn't know what came over her. I asked her whether she meant that as regards breaking my phone or sleeping with another person. That caught her off guard because she had to shamelessly say both. I told her right away that the only way things would go would be to divorce, and that she shouldn't try to dissuade me. Thankfully, it seemed like she actually realized that it wasn't going to be a good idea to try and dissuade me, at least in that moment, so she didn't. However, she eventually did on later days, and the more I told her to not waste her breath, the more aggressive she became. At the end of it, she claimed that she was going to milk me for everything I had, but I let her know that the court wouldn't go to gift her for being a cheater that was caught in 4K. I remember laughing at her as I said that, and her face looked the scariest I've ever seen it. In that moment, I wouldn't have been surprised if she tried to hurt me. At that point, I hadn't fixed my broken phone, and I had just opted to use my iPad whenever I could. The other phone was in a drawer upstairs, pending when I'd have the funds to get it fixed. I knew I was about to go through a divorce, so it didn't seem like something that I needed to spend on just yet. When I was sitting on the couch using my iPad, she came out from the bedroom and dropped my phone in my lap, sopping wet. "So much for your evidence." That was what she said to me, and it was at that moment that I realized how little I could predict her anymore. She was literally a different person at that point, and I started to worry about how safe it would be to be around her. Just so you know, she's not a tech person, so I'm not sure whether she factored cloud storage into her equation. I stood up, put the phone in my pocket, and told her that I was leaving the house. I really wanted to take my kids with me, but I was actually scared that doing that would devolve things into a really messy state where they could potentially get hurt. So, before I left the house, I called her mom, who used every opportunity she had to see the kids. I told her to pack a few things and stay at the house. She kept asking why, but I was sure not to say more than I needed to. She agreed, and before she arrived, I was out of there. This happened a few days ago, and in that time, I've got a divorce lawyer and served her with the divorce papers. I was able to get her mother to take the kids over to her own place, which settled me a lot better. I prefer Grace being at home alone rather than with my kids. All that remains now is the divorce process, and I really hope that it goes smoothly for me. It's like she thought if she broke your phone, she could erase reality itself. It's great that you had the foresight to back up the footage because she clearly didn't think that far ahead. She's unhinged. Update 2. The divorce happened, and it went exactly how one might expect. She fought tooth and nail for everything she could potentially get her hands on. It was clear she was trying to make things a lot harder than they needed to be, and of course, her lawyer was backing her on that. Ultimately, I knew that there was going to be no escaping certain things, and that ended up being the case. I have alimony and child support to pay, which is quite frustrating, but considering that she's been a stay-at-home mom and her income is far from mine, I knew it had happened that way. We also got 50-50 custody, which I hated since I felt like I had enough to prove that her mental state should have been in question after the whole thing went down. The judge seemed somewhat sympathetic to her, and that pissed me off. I did manage to keep the cars since they were both in mine anyway. So yeah, I got screwed over for the most part. The only thing I was able to try and work in my favor was the amount and term of the alimony. However, I presented all the evidence that I had on her cheating in court. She was shocked to see it since she must have thought she had destroyed my phone. I mean, she had, because the water damage after it got smashed made it pointless to repair. All the evidence didn't mean much though, and even though we had hardly spoken throughout the divorce proceedings, she managed to throw a jab at me as we passed by each other. "Those videos sure helped, right?" She had the stupidest smirk on her face, and I realized at that moment that I actually hated her, or whoever she had become. It was at that moment that I knew I was going to do one last thing I needed to punish her for the cheating. So, I put together a group chat, adding every single person I had on my phone who knew her. That ended up being a total of 57 people. I wish I had access to her phone because I would have included her contacts who I didn't even know. And then I sent the footage to all of them. I cut out any parts that were too explicit, but I made sure that everyone got the gist of the divorce. They needed to know that despite the fact that I got effed over in the end, I wasn't the bad guy in the whole thing. Needless to say, I got so many messages and calls after that, including from her, but I didn't answer a single one of them. I didn't need to entertain anybody. The video was clear enough to understand what was going on, and I didn't want to hear anyone tell me to delete it. The best part was that I had been kicked out of the house that I bought, so she had no idea where to find me. All she could do was send angry text messages after angry text messages. Each one she sent just a bit bigger smile on my face. Eventually, when I started answering phone calls again, one of her sisters called and said that she understood why the divorce happened. She sounded very disapproving of her sister, and even though that didn't matter at the end of the day, it felt really nice to have someone from her side who could point out how bad a person Grace was. Anyway, that's it. I'm divorced now, and my children are now shuffling between two homes, which I really didn't want them to have to deal with, but I feel like growing up in a single home with peace is a lot better than them growing up with both parents constantly fighting each other. What a nightmare. But I'm glad that's finally over. As for the kids, I totally get why 50-50 isn't ideal, but you're right. Growing up in a peaceful home is better than being around constant tension. They'll see the truth over time, and the best thing you can do now is focus on moving forward. You got through the worst of it. Now it's time to build something better. Do you think exposing a cheater like this was justified, or did it cross a line? How have you exposed your ex? Share your stories with us in the comments. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you soon!